Dr. Johnson here, and I'm back today to talk to you about one of my favorite systems in the human body, the immune system. You've probably heard a lot of talk in the news about antibodies and testing for antibodies as a way to help us better understand who's been infected with the coronavirus. But what are antibodies, and why are we testing for them? Well, antibodies are Y-shaped proteins made by your immune system to help identify antigens on pathogens and signal to have them destroyed. Antigens initiate an immune response, and they're found on the surface of pathogens. Pathogens are disease-causing microorganisms, so teeny tiny things that get into our body and make us sick, things like bacteria and viruses. But we're exposed to pathogens every day. They're all around us. So how do we not end up sick all the time? Well, your immune system is like your own secret service designed to keep you safe. In fact, we have 3 lines of defense. The first includes our physical and chemical barriers. That includes things like our skin, our mucous membranes inside our nose and our mouth, our stomach acid, and even our tears. But if pathogens make it past that first line of defense, they're met by our second line of defense, our innate or non-specific immune response. This includes highly specialized white blood cells called phagocytes that eat or engulf any pathogen they come across to destroy it. They don't care what kind it is. Our third response is our adaptive immune response. This is the part of the immune system that develops as we grow and mature. It's responsible for making the antibodies that recognize and help destroy the pathogens that can make us sick. So how are antibodies made? Well, when a new pathogen like the coronavirus enters our body, specialized white blood cells called lymphocytes are called to action. In particular, B cells bind to the antigen on the surface of the pathogen. The B cell recognizes the pathogen as a foreign invader that needs to be destroyed. With the help of other lymphocytes called T cells, B cells can multiply into plasma cells and memory cells. Plasma cells make tons of copies of the antibody, that Y-shaped protein that recognizes the pathogen. Those antibodies circulate throughout our system and attach to the antigens on pathogens and let other white blood cells know where they are so they can be destroyed. The memory cells store information about the pathogen, which will help our immune system respond to future exposures. What's even cooler is our bodies develop separate antibodies for every new pathogen we're exposed to. Each pathogen has its own unique antigens. For example, the antigens on the coronavirus are different than the antigens on E. coli because they're different microorganisms. Just like your house key only opens the lock on your door, antibodies only bind antigens on specific pathogens. So let's think about this in the context of COVID-19, the disease caused by the coronavirus, a new virus humans have never been exposed to. Well, when a new virus or new pathogen enters our body for the first time, that initiates what's called our primary immune response. That's when those specialized lymphocytes, those B cells and T cells, are called to action. So the first time that you're exposed, you're going to see a slow and steady increase in the number of antibodies. And that's because it takes time for those B cells to find the pathogen, recognize it as a foreign invader, and make those new antibodies. But over time, the need for antibodies starts to decrease because your body is fighting off the pathogen. So as your body starts to destroy the pathogen and decrease the number of antibodies needed also decreases until you're no longer sick. But let's say a couple of months go by and you get exposed to the coronavirus again, or that same pathogen. That second exposure initiates what's called the secondary immune response. And all thanks to those memory cells, this response is much faster and stronger. As soon as that pathogen enters your body, those memory cells recognize it and start pumping out antibodies immediately. So you see a huge spike in the number of antibodies very quickly, and this allows your body to fight off the pathogen much more quickly and efficiently during the secondary exposure versus the primary exposure. To help us better understand the difference between the primary and secondary immune response, I have a cool demonstration I'd like to share. So here we have a glass jar that represents the human body, and it's filled with salt that represents human cells. You might also notice some darker particles. Those are iron filings, and they represent the pathogens that have gotten into our body and can make us sick. So we've got to get those B cells and T cells into action and making those antibodies. Well, since our antigens on our pathogens, these iron filings, are metal, what better thing to use than magnets as our antibodies? And so we can illustrate the difference between the primary and secondary immune response by seeing how the number of antibodies relates to how many antigens are identified and removed from the body, and we can measure this by taking the mass of antigens removed. For the primary immune response, we're going to use 3 antibodies, and this helps replicate that graph, right, where it was a slow and small peak of number of antibodies. Now remember, the secondary immune response is initiated the second time you're exposed to the same pathogen. So let's say this is a few months after that first exposure. This time, we're going to use 6 antibodies because those memory cells immediately started pumping out antibodies following exposure. So let's take a look at our results. For the primary immune response, or 3 antibodies, we were able to remove about 19 grams of antigen. For the secondary immune response with 6 antibodies, we were able to remove 43 grams, so more than double. This clearly demonstrates that when your body can make more antibodies, it will be able to identify and remove more pathogens, resulting in a faster and stronger immune response, just like we saw with our secondary immune response. The immune system is super complex, and what we talked about today was a very simplified version, but it helps us answer the question, why are we testing for antibodies? Well, like we just learned, our immune system only makes antibodies when we've been exposed to a pathogen, like the coronavirus. So doctors can test our blood and look for those antibodies to determine if we currently are or have ever been sick with the coronavirus, or any disease for that matter. Stay tuned for my next video where we dive into how we test for those antibodies. See you later.